And we are streaming, just so you know. Ken, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Jennifer, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Good. Just want to make sure we can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, good.
Jeff Holcomb here.
Hey, Commissioner Holcomb, how are you?
Good.
Good. Hey, David, good morning.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Commissioner Long, how are you?
I'm just fine. Thank you so much.
It's just like old times, I was telling our staff. We used to do this all the time.
Yeah, well, I don't like it for whatever that's worth. Am I the only one on at the moment?
No, we have, I know Commissioner Holcomb is on, David Green, most of the TBARTA staff.
Okay.
You should be able to see the gallery now.
The only face I can see is Melanie and Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Melanie. I don't see David. He's muted. Hi. There's Bowden, Ken Bowden, Brian Pissarro, Jennifer Cohen. Hey, Jennifer.
Hello. Good morning.
Okay, we have a minute. I'll be right back. Okay, so according to my time frame, it's 9 o'clock. Does everyone agree?
It is 9
Jennifer?
o'clock.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for joining us. Good morning, Commissioner Overman.
Good morning.
Do we have I don't believe we have a quorum, do we, Jennifer?
No, ma'am. For the committee, I have you present and Commissioner Jeff Holcomb. Oh, wait. No, Mr. Manuel is not on this committee, so he does not count towards your quorum.
But I would add that since we are meeting virtually, I don't believe that we can take any votes anyway.
Correct.
But we can make recommendations.
I believe the chair's intent was to have discussion and recommendations and however you'd like to proceed.
Okay. I'm not on my big iPad, so I'm trying to figure out what's the best angle here. All right, I think you can all see me.
We can see you. I'm in my, we can see you and I'm in my car, so we're both flying.
Oh, I hope you're not driving. That's
No,
very
I did.
bad.
I just parked. Okay, so yes.
All right, well, for purposes
Hi,
of
it's Jim.
today, yes,
Oh, Jim, it's Jim joining Janet.
Jim Holton is on the phone.
Yeah, sorry,
Oh,
I had to get
thank,
my code.
thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Holton. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We have a quorum now, don't we, Jennifer?
Yes, ma'am. You do have 3 out of the 5 members, which is required for the quorum. And if you don't mind, I'd also like to, for the record, state who else is present.
Perfect, please do.
We also have present, you, Commissioner Janet Long. We have present Commissioner Jeff Holcomb. We have Mr. Jeff Holton present. Those are all the committee members. And in addition, we have Commissioner Kimberly Overman, Secretary David Gwynn, and Cliff Manuel.
Okay. Thank you. All right, may I have, and we've had our roll call. I don't imagine there's any public that have joined us. Are there, Jennifer?
I have no public comment.
All right, moving on. I'm assuming everyone's had an opportunity to read the May Finance Committee minutes. If so, I'd like to have a motion and a second, please, to move that along.
Sorry, Madam Chair, there can't be any official action at the committee.
Well, okay, then. Why are we here?
You can discuss, but there can be no official action while we're all virtual.
Is there any discussion about the May minutes? Anyone? Okay. Melanie, are you prepared to go over the financial statements for May?
I have the June financial statements I can review and go over. Are you ready for me to kind of give an overview of the June financial statements?
All right, well, I guess my agenda is incorrect because it says May, but if we're working off of June, that's fine as well.
Yes, it is incorrect. May was discussed last board meeting, finance meeting. So if you want me to proceed, I will go ahead and just go over the June financials.
Please do.
Okay, so through the end of June, we had a net surplus of $387,000. Now this surplus was $33,000 over the budgeted amount of $354,000. Looking at the revenue, we are still under budget by $741,000, and this is due to the timing of the Guidalist study and the PD&E study. And this under budget amount leads to also an under budget amount of the expenditures of $775,000. Moving over to the balance sheet, at the end of June, we had our accounts payable balance was approximately 381,000. Our accounts receivable balance was 646,000. And at the end of June, we had approximately 808,000 in the bank. And that's the overview for through June 2022.
All right, is there any discussion, comments, questions from anyone? Okay. Melanie, do you want to review our 2023 draft budget?
Yes, I'll go into that right now. So included in your packet, you will see the FY 2023 budget. The goal today is to review and have a discussion and present the final draft in the board meeting next month in August. So looking here at the budget, we have budgeted $3.2 million for the expenditures for FY 2023. Now, this is $580,000 or 15% less than the FY 22 budget. So looking at the overall budget, it generally breaks down to about a third for the band pool program, a third for the professional services, and a third for all other expenditures. Now, going through each of the categories, starting with the rent, we anticipate a 183% increase from FY 22. Now, this is due to a full fiscal year, which is 12 months of the rent expense, as opposed to 3 months of which we're paying for this fiscal year. So next is the office and administration category, and it's a 26% decrease from FY 22. And this is due to the reduction of the supplies and staff training. And it also includes the relocation expense, which we don't need in fiscal 2023. Next is the communications category, and it's a 17% decrease from FY 22. And this is due to the reduction of costs associated with the public outreach. Going over to the advertising, marketing, and printing is a 3% decrease from FY 22. And this includes the expenses for the Commute Tampa Bay related activities, which is covered mainly by the State Commuter Assistance Program grant. Next is the computer equipment and software, and it's a 6% decrease from FY 22. And this is due to the reduction in the costs associated with the software and computer maintenance. Next is insurance, and it's 11% increase from FY 22. And this is due to the higher cost general liability package that we have. Travel and auto stayed the same for FY 22, so there's no change. Staff salary is 3% from FY 22. Benefits is an 8% decrease from FY 22, and this is due to a reduction of the full-time position. Next is professional services, and this is a 44% decrease from FY 2022, and this is due to the reduction of the cost of the consultants and contractors related to the projects. Now, included in the professional services is also the federal lobbyists of $60,000. Now, there would be an additional potential savings of 3% if we terminate the contract. Next is the operating projects, which includes the van pool and emergency ride home. And this is a 29% increase from FY 22, and this is due to the increased demand of ridership. So the funding sources for FY 2023 include 3 of the federal grants and 4 of the state grants, along with the local contributions, and assumes no funding sources from the CAP grant. And at the end of FY 2023, we'll only have the federal 5307 grant and the local contributions remaining. And those are the highlights of the FY 2023 budget. And that concludes the overview.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Are there any questions?
I would like to make a comment.
Yes.
if
Okay.
possible. One of the reasons the ridership is increasing for the van pool is that MacDill Air Force Base has ramped up their new service persons programs in order to make sure that there is an opportunity for their service folks to reduce their housing costs. They are having great difficulty finding housing. They need to have housing that's kind of close to the base. Otherwise, it becomes a security risk when they can't get to the base in a timely fashion. But they also are feeling the effects of increased rents without a base housing allowance increase. So in order to address that, they're reaching out to new and existing service personnel that need to be at MacDill Air Force Base on a daily basis, and encouraging them to take advantage of the PAM pool or in increasing their outreach to allow them to know when they are living near other service persons in order to take advantage of it. Now that travel allowance does assist them in covering the cost, but it will increase demand, and we anticipate that there will be increased demand in 2023, which is part of the reason why we're seeing an increase in demand. I just want to make sure people kind of understood it's not just our general population that's looking to that, but it's also a significant increase is anticipated by our military families that use the service. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Commissioner Overman, for that overview. And I'd like to make everyone aware, if you don't know, Commissioner Starkey has joined us. Good morning, Commissioner. Nice to see you again.
Good morning.
And-
And I wanted to say we have David coming up to Pasco, and we're doing another presentation on the van pool, because at this time when gas is so expensive, we want to really raise awareness of the opportunity. And so we're going to be highlighting it again in an upcoming meeting.
Okay, thank you for that information. And Secretary Gwen, I understand that you are now able to hear us, and you could participate if you so choose, correct?
Correct. I had a speaker problem, but they fixed it.
Good, very good. All right, so does anyone else have any comments or questions about the finance report? All right, seeing none, I would just like to, for clarification, just ask a couple questions or raise a couple concerns about the local match that we receive from our funding partners. I see we do not have anyone from Manatee that has joined us, correct? Okay. And according to the document that I have in front of me, Melanie, maybe you could, my report says we have $538,456 in local contributions. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. It excludes the city of Tampa Bay. The city of Tampa.
So I didn't see in the packet, maybe it was there, and maybe I just missed it, but I was focused on this cheat sheet that I have. Is there a breakdown? I know you've gone over this before, but just because this is the Finance Committee and we're trying to get clarification, can you identify for us, please, the contribution for this next year that is anticipated from each of the member counties?
Yes. Give me one moment. I have to find that. I didn't have the breakdown in front of me. So if you just give me one moment, Commissioner Long.
Sure. Yes, and I apologize for just now asking.
It's the old one.
Take your time.
I think the quickest way for me to find it is to look at the previous board meeting, because I'm on a different computer. Give me 1 second. I'm almost there. Okay. Here it is here.
David, do you have those numbers handy? David Green?
I don't have them handy. I would have to dig through the network like Melanie's doing.
Yes, just give me, I'm sorry, just give me, I'm almost there. Just give me 1 second. It's not there. I'm sorry to waste your time, your time. I'm looking for it and I do not seem to find it right now, the breakdown. Oh, I'm sorry, here it is. I apologize. So the breakdown of it is Hernando, $33,067.55. Hillsborough County is $248,159.54. Manatee County is $67,950.70. Pasco County is $95,521.47. Pinellas County is $163,048.19. St. Petersburg, the city of St. Petersburg is $45,526.34.
Question on that, Melanie and Janet, if you, I remember there was a number change for Pinellas because we might have been counting St. Pete residents twice. Is that the old number or the new?
That is the old number. I apologize. You are correct, Commissioner Starkey. The subtraction is, the difference of that is Pinellas County, and that total will be if I subtract that from there. So let's revise that. So everything is correct with the exception of Hillsborough is, we did the change and I was taking this from the previous let me just check my numbers. I'm going to check my numbers real quick and go to the detail. Okay, so I'm going to go back over the detail of that. Okay, so Hernando County is $33,067.55. Hillsborough is minus the Tampa. So that would be 248, 159.04 minus 69,294.3. So that'd be $178,867.21. And then one moment to check the numbers. And Pinellas.
Oh, my goodness.
I didn't have that prepared. I just had a summary for today, so I apologize for that.
If you want to read me the numbers, I'll whip it up here on my calculator.
Well,
No, I have the
because-
numbers. I'm just verifying before I put it into record. So, okay. So I just want to make sure before I make sure I have the correct numbers here. So Hernando is $33,067.55. Manatee is $67,950.70. Pasco is $95,521.47. Hillsborough is $178,861.71. And St. Petersburg, Pinellas is $117,521.85. And that should total.
170,000 what? 825?
Yeah. $178,867.71. So yes, Hillsborough is $178,867.71.
What about Pinellas?
Pinellas is $117,521.85. That should tie to 33,067 plus 178.
Okay, so thank you, Melanie, for that breakdown of the individual partners. My question is, David, are we certain that this local money is coming forward? We haven't finalized our budget yet. There's a lot of questions amongst the colleagues on my commission about whether or not we will be paying this money. And so I'm thinking that the majority of your operating expenses are coming out of local match. Is that correct?
That is correct. There are many expenses coming out of local, more than in previous years.
Okay. And so therein is our dilemma in my mind from a public policy perspective. And so because we're going to shortly here run out of time and get into the policy discussion, which is what I am most interested in today about the future of TBARTA. Do you want to talk about the discussion item that relates to your review, David?
Oh, sure, I could do that. So the BMO Performance review?
Yeah.
Sure. So the board awarded a contract for professional legal services to Bryant Miller Olive back effective August 3rd of 2018, and it continues until terminated, with either party able to terminate for any reason. The contract states that prior to August of each year during the term of the agreement, we need to review BMO's performance and compensation. So I just wanted to do that quickly today. Jennifer Cowan has become our point of contact this year and has done a great job. She's reviewed procurement documents when needed and played a key role in developing the interlocal agreement for local funding and negotiating our new office lease. She's been available whenever needed, attended all board meetings, finance and policy committee meetings, and certainly advised the agency well. Staff is fully satisfied with BMO's performance. As far as their rates, General counsel services and rates for attorneys are $255 an hour. Paralegals and law clerks are $125 an hour, both of which are in line with the market. BMO did not request a rate increase this year and agreed to keep them at current levels moving into FY23. So at this point, I'd just like to open it to the committee for any additional comments.
Any comments, anyone? Anybody? I don't see anyone wanting to make a comment. And so because we have, we do have a couple things we really have to discuss, but I think at this point, it more falls under the policy discussion, and it's 4 minutes before the policy meeting is supposed to meet. So I guess my question to you, David, is who is chairing the policy committee?
Commissioner Starkey.
Excellent. Okay, so shall we adjourn from this meeting and start the policy committee meeting, or at least get the particulars out of the way for that, given that I doubt we'll have any public comment? Your call, Catherine.
Yeah, I've got my notes up here. I mean, we still have 3 minutes, Janet, under yours, if there's anything more we want to discuss.
I don't hear anyone or wanting to discuss anything further. Would you like to lead the way on that?
Well, I should have a pencil and paper here so I could do the math, but what is the total, the budget, the payroll budget comes from the local match?
Correct.
Is that what I heard you say? And
yeah,
and even though Melanie gave that number, I don't know if we have a guarantee that everyone's sending that in. I know Pasco County is sending it in. So what do we know is guaranteed to come in?
I don't have the answer to that. I know Pinellas is very much up in the air. And if I had to make a guess today, I would guess that we will not be contributing.
Okay, interesting. We've committed to contribute, but I understand that.
Have you brought your budget to fruition yet in Pasco?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. We have not. We're in the throes of doing that right now. We have our final budget presentation, or, coming up on Tuesday. There are too many questions coming from too many of the members about what is the relevance of TBARTA. And given that we were not having a full board meeting this month, right after the governor vetoed our funding, it has sent a huge message that, when I asked the reason why we weren't having a board meeting, it was because we had no action item, to which I said, are you kidding me? We have no money from the state again, and we don't have any conversation scheduled for what is the future of TBARTA, and yet we decide we're not going to have a board meeting. I find that so irresponsible. I don't even know where to begin. So those are my thoughts and comments, which now take us to almost a minute before the policy meeting. But I do have some suggestions and some recommendations for the policy committee. So I'll wait till we start.
Okay, why don't you close your financial and we'll roll into the policy.
Okay, could I have a motion to adjourn the policy committee, please? I know you're shaking your head. Take any
I make that
action,
motion.
Jennifer.
Yes,
How
you
do
can adjourn it.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Okay. All right. And now I'm going to call to order the July Policy Committee meeting. And we will do the roll call, please.
Good morning, Commissioner Starkey. So for the committee members, you have present yourself, Commissioner Starkey. We have Commissioner Long present. We have Commissioner Jeff Holcomb present, and we also have Mr. Jim Holton present. In addition, from the board, you also have Commissioner Kimberly Overman present, Secretary David Gwynn, and Mr. Cliff Manuel. And if I may, just to let you know, for public comment, Mr. Bill Roberts would like to make a comment when that time comes. He's in the waiting room already. He's already in the meeting. He's present.
Okay, well, now's the time for public comment. So a person wishing to address the board can do so in either of two ways. Comments no more than 400 words may be sent to publiccomment@tbarta.com and be read into the record. Written comments must be received no later than the day before the meeting. Comments must include the name, address, organization, and topic or agenda item. See staff prior to the meeting to complete a comment card, which really doesn't work in this instance. You'll be able to provide comment for 3 minutes when recognized. So now I'll take public comment and we'll hear from Bill Roberts.
Thank you, Commissioner Starkey. I'll take just a moment. I know you've got a full agenda today. I'm Bill Roberts. I chair your Citizens Advisory Committee. In the absence of a board meeting, I thought it appropriate to report to the Policy Committee that the CAC is active. We are meeting through the summer. We had a quorum at our most recent meeting. I would like to report that there continues to be tremendously good support for the Van Pool program. I was glad to hear Commissioner Overman's comments earlier about how that's expanding. We have gone on record that is a true success story for TBARTA and would help us both with the public and with our legislators. Let me just close by saying that the representatives on the CAC represent all of your various counties, and we stand ready to assist you in any way in getting the legislature back on board, however the board should elect to move forward with TBARTA. Thank you, Commissioner, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak during public comment?
No one else.
Okay. So do we want to go into, well, let's, I don't know if we need to talk about number 4, our May policy meetings. We're not going to vote on them. So we'll just save that for another day, I would think. So we have the CSX quarter and the state funding veto. But I kind of think we continued the discussion that Janet had started before we even get into anything. Because in my opinion, the rubber meets the road when we see who's willing to help fund the expenses of operating expenses of TBARTA with their county dollars or city dollars, and who don't. And if you're not going to be funding it, and a majority aren't going to help fund it, then we don't have a TBARTA. So I guess, I've told you where Pasco is. I don't know where the other counties are or cities. But certainly we can't be the only one paying in. But we believe very much in a regionalism, and I have a member who still questions what we're doing, and Commissioner Moore. But I wasn't ready to throw in the towel, but maybe the rest of you are. So members, are you ready to throw in the towel?
Commissioner Starkey,
Yeah.
this is Commissioner Long. I can't see everyone that's on here anymore, so I'm not sure who's here and who's not from the other counties. But my comments are made because for several reasons, and I'd like to be clear about where my position is. I believe in regionalism. I have been a very strong advocate for regionalism. My involvement in TBARTA goes all the way back to 2006, when Senator Fasano and Senator Galvano originally introduced the TBARTA legislation. And I was a very strong advocate in my caucus to get that passed. Well, we did get it passed while I was in the legislature, and I was very much involved in the reiteration of TBARTA in 16 and 17. So I don't want anyone to think that I do not believe in regionalism. Clearly, I don't think any of us have time to be involved in an exercise in futility. Until the political climate in Tallahassee changes, it is, to me, an exercise in futility to spend the dollars to go back to the legislature and advocate for dollars again. While we have been able to 5 times in a row get it through the legislature, we have only been successful 1 out of 5 times, and from my calculation. Secondly, you know, the reiteration of TBARTA was never intended to be a regurgitation of everything that had been done for the last 50 years. It was supposed to be focused on moving our region forward. And, you know, we take 1 baby step forward and 10 steps backwards almost every single year. So to me, you know, I've had several conversations with several other folks from various areas of the region about the way in which to solve this. And, you know, as an example, I have talked often on this board of aligning ourselves with another agency. A lot of us on this board, most of us, the majority, are elected officials charged with the public checkbook. To me, we ought to be taking different action than we've done for the last 5 years, because we're not getting any different result. And, you know, that's the definition of insanity if you keep on doing the same thing, expecting a different result. And so the example of the Regional Planning Council, for instance, has the same partners as this agency does. They have many planners in that agency. To me, we could be a division, a department, or whatever with that agency and cut out all of this, you know, repetitiveness, quite frankly, because we're not doing anything differently than what the Regional Planning Council does primarily, number 1. And number 2, I know some folks will bring up the van pool, but the van pool is truly, in my head, a glorified bus agency, which doesn't serve the entire region by any stretch. So you may remember several years ago, and I promised to not wax on, but we created a memorandum of understanding with, for example, PSTA, who has proven to be a very stable and a very well organized, run agency that literally is responsible for pulling us out of the ditch financially. That memorandum of understanding still exists today. We could eliminate almost all of our budget by operating under that memorandum of understanding. And if we don't do that, because David said several members of the board would be against doing that, well, then let somebody else come up with a different idea. But to me, to even suggest we go back to the legislature is irresponsible, a waste of money and a waste of time. There isn't, well, this is my last point. There's not one meeting that we've had where we've had a legislative update where our 2 lobbyists don't advocate on behalf of TBARTA and on behalf of PSTA. So why on earth we can't operate under that contract and cut out that amount of money, to me, is just mind-boggling. And I'll stop for now and see what everyone else has to say, but I may have.
All right. Thanks, Janet. I see Commissioner Overman has her hand up. She's next.
Thank you. And I hear the concern. I totally do. I also hear the concern about whether or not we had a board meeting or not. I also know that Hillsborough County has not agended the contribution as of yet, because we've not yet had our first budget workshop for being able to determine what our budget looks like and what should and should not be included for 2023. So I'm not 100% certain how our board would participate or would consider participating in TBARTA at this point. But I'm not going to suggest that because we haven't responded means, the answer is no. So I do know that I'm bringing that as the board for Heart. I'm bringing that information to our Heart board, which this month was pushed back because, normally it would have been on the 4th of July and nobody wanted to meet that day. But but I also do know that, our planning commission and our TMA, are planning agencies. They're not transit agencies. They're not transportation implementors. The whole idea is, in my mind, has been that the region is interested in creating a way of helping people get around using transportation and transit, because that was how the organization was sort of reformulated several years ago to be more focused on some level of transit, whether that be, buses, gondolas, trains, in any of the above, right? In order to do that, there needs to be a transit agency. And at the last meeting, which actually relates to the next agenda item of the Suncoast Planning Alliance, as well as the Transportation Management Area, which is the 3 counties of District 7, and the full counties of the entire District 7, agreed to really take a look at, for the first time, moving the needle forward and determining how we should proceed with creating a potential, passenger transit avenue along the right of ways that are currently owned by CSX, and to begin that conversation. As the state chose to update the rail plan, for example, and there was conversation about how do we move forward and who do we negotiate with, or who does the negotiating with the current rail provider in our region that only provides primarily freight, as well as Amtrak, which provides some transit, passenger rail. Who would be that party that would be able to do those kinds of negotiations that's involved in transit in our region? That's in my mind, I'm wearing my hat as a representative of Heart that's been trying to get, a transit plan put into place and has been on our Hillsborough County's priority list for 30 years. And we're finally starting to move forward on it, is the reason TBARTA, in my mind, exists, because it wouldn't just run in Hillsborough. It would have to run through Pasco. It would have to run to Manatee. It would have to run through Pinellas. And so it is a regional exploration, and it would be a regional project. In order for us to qualify for potentially federal funds to subsidize or to support the operation of a regional transit project would require a regional agency. And unlike other areas, for example, Jacksonville, where Jacksonville has its own not only planning agency, but transit agency as part of its county and city, but part of its county, they make all those decisions at that one board and get it done and apply and get money. Because each of our counties are different, each of our planning agencies are different. And even though we have a collective planning agency through, the Suncoast Planning Alliance and the TMA, as well as, all of us partnering together to look at this together on how to plan for it, we would still need an agency that could work with all of the various different individual transit agencies to share in the development of any kind of transit project. So while it does seem counterintuitive because we can't seem to get the state to understand that, so they haven't necessarily supported us, I still think there needs to be a venue for being able to explore that. And because we've had a bias against rail in this state and transit in this state, it doesn't necessarily mean that the van pool is the ultimate goal. But we have worked on the BRT, just happens to run through an area that is sensitive to Hillsborough County, and that's been why there's been a pushback. But there isn't necessarily a pushback on the idea of having, a regional bus rapid transit service that needs to make sense and operate well. And we're not quite there yet with the plan that we've had. But I think it's possible. And FDOT needs us to do that planning. FDOT needs a transit agency in order to fund any kind of partnership that we would have. So while it does seem counterintuitive at the moment, and as we have not gotten an answer, for example, from Hillsborough on the shared participation, I'm not sure that is a reflection of whether or not Hillsborough is committed to the process right now. That argument has to be made at our workshop. It's not been done. The argument and the documents or the reports of our meetings have not been, as far as I know, been reported to HART. So that, because we haven't had a meeting this month and we just got all of the collective meetings for the last several months sent to us. So I know it seems counterintuitive, but I do believe that there's a reason we're here. And I do believe that it's not the time to throw in the towel. All it does is confirm that, that the state is right, that we don't want transit and we don't want regional transit in this region. And I would suggest that is not true. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Commissioner Overman. And it's interesting, Pasco County, a number of years ago, we started working on our budget much earlier in the year. And so we're done. We can break for the summer. Staff can take a breather. So maybe we're a little ahead of all of you, knowing and understanding where our commitments are. I'd love to hear from some of the other counties that are on here. I see Commissioner Holcomb. I don't think I see Manatee on here today. Is Manatee represented here today? But I agree with Commissioner Overman on a lot of what she said, except for the BRT part. And as she knows, if we'd had that, what is it, a half a mile? I don't know how long that little piece is that's holding up our regional transit plan, but I don't want to throw in the towel. I think we need a regional transit authority. We stand still committed. Half of my county is driving down to Hillsborough to work. I don't think that's going to be sustainable if we don't find a solution soon. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty for our citizens, and it's not today. It's in 10, 20 years. What is that going to look like? And we'll have wasted some opportunities. Commissioner Holcomb, you don't have your hand up, but do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I'm just on the phone, but so we have had our budget workshop and we seem pretty set with our budget, and there's no issues with us funding from Hernando County. I think I agree with a lot of everything that's been said. So I'm probably one of the newest people on the board, maybe I've been here, I don't know, maybe 9-10 months, a year, something like that. And I've had some struggles with, what's our focus? Is it, I think van pools are great. And I think that's something that services Hernando County. But I'd also maybe like to get David up to Hernando County and talk about that more with our board. So maybe we could expand that. But I think we got to get focused. I mean, we've had presentations on some flying helicopter things and other things which seem pretty out of scope, to be fair. And I think if we could find a pathway that is focused and directional that would benefit the region, I would think that Tallahassee would be on board with that. I think the fact that, you know, we're not necessarily there, and I think I agree with Commissioner Starkey on the last topic with the BRT. If we're truly trying to get regional transit, we're going to have to break a few eggs in some places. It's just the way it's going to have to be. I mean, you think of all the different systems around the country, whether it's DC or New York, at some point in time, they had to go through a neighborhood that wasn't going to be happy with them, or they go under a neighborhood or something, depending on the region. That it's going to have to happen. Otherwise, transit's not going to make it. So there's going to have to be some ugly situations that probably, and we'll try and find the best solutions for that. But you know, I think we're all dealing with that from a growth standpoint right now. But to Commissioner Starkey's last point, in 10 years, you know, in my community is a commuter community. You know, if you're coming to live in Hernando County, you're probably coming here for a little cheaper house price point, and you're probably driving to some of the other counties to work. So Pasco and Hillsborough and maybe Pinellas. So yeah, I want to see good transit, and you know, without some sort of solution, whether it's bus or a rapid bus or something, you know, the veterans 75, 275, 19 are just going to be filled up with more and more cars. That's all I got.
I don't know who raised their hand first, David Gwynn or Cliff Manuel, so I apologize. I'll go with Secretary Gwynn, and then we'll go with our Chair Manuel. So.
Okay, good morning. Just a couple of things I wanted to bring up. One, and just to respond to Commissioner Overman, Commissioner, you made a comment. I think that maybe you meant it a little different, but that the state doesn't support transit. What I want to make sure is known is that we are the biggest funder of transit in the region. We have, every time we've had a project that's had a local contribution, we've come up with the match. We're reserving about $70 million for the streetcar without even a local match yet, in the hope that there will be a match. We're funding the transit BRT studies. We funded in Sunrail. So I think to say that the state is what's holding up transit in the region is not really a fair representation. We stand ready. You know, 5 years ago, we faced a similar situation with our highway funding. We couldn't get big projects funded in our region. And we came up with a really good model to address that. And that's, we got all the counties, we got all the business community, we've got everybody speaking with one voice. And we went to Tallahassee and we got funding for huge projects. And we started to get the money.
Airport.
Yep, exactly. And the airport, the ports, everybody came together. And the legislature helped to respond by providing us money for the Howard Franklin Bridge, for the Great Way project, for the West Shore interchange. And I think we could potentially have a similar type of a success with transit, but we don't speak as one region. We speak, if you listen into TBARTA board meetings, quite honestly, would you think there was a lot of consensus in the meetings? I think until we get ourselves, the business community, all the other stakeholders to all come together and speak with one voice about transit, it's going to be hard to get the money, just like it was for the highway projects. But we stand ready to be a funding partner and a planning partner. Sunrail is a good example. The region over there came together. It was multiple counties, it was cities. They all came together, they coalesced around a project, and they were able to get it funded. But I think as long as we don't have everybody speaking with the same voice, as long as we have the county in the center pretty much not wanting to participate in the one project that was brought up, we're going to be in this boat. So I think until we solve that part of it, it will be difficult to get a lot of support out of Tallahassee. But we are ready. And we are funding projects, and we're putting a lot of money in transit in the Tampa region.
Thank you very much, Secretary Gwynn. Cliff?
My thoughts are the same as Secretary Gwynn's. I think we failed in Tallahassee at the governor's desk because we could not deliver to him a regional voice that included Hart and PSTA and Hillsborough and Pinellas. We went back up there with the same sort of old laundry with us and threw it on his desk and said, please support us. I don't think we're ever going to Tallahassee and getting any significant funding for this transit agency or any other until we can get our own bed made and in order so that we can present that unified front. I don't think the governor would have vetoed our funding if he thought we were all one voice. He knows we're not. I think Commissioner, I'm gonna make you a commissioner one day, David. I think Secretary Gwynn, made it very clear, listening to our own board meetings today included, or this policy discussion, we're not one voice. We're several voices talking about trying to be one voice, and we've never gotten there. So, unified transit agency is a great idea, but Hart in the PSTA and Hillsborough and Pinellas and the big counties where all the voters are and the power is, that they've got to agree that they want to move forward as one voice. And I think if we ever show up in Tallahassee with that accomplished, we'll get funding.
Thank you. Commissioner Overman.
Thank you. And I appreciate the comments that were made. I did not mean to imply that FDOT is not supporting in transit. I did not mean to say that. But I don't think Tallahassee is ready for us. And to the point that was just made, we haven't agreed on how to attract or how to address or how to develop and strategize regional transit. And part of that is the constraints that Hillsborough specifically has, which hopefully can get remedied with the, with our ability to hopefully keep our fingers crossed, pass the referendum this November. Hillsborough County is so behind the power curve when it comes to our transportation infrastructure that being able to participate in a BRT would financially be very difficult to do, and just in the operations. As our own agency, transit agency, is at risk of not even existing in a few years if we don't pass this referendum. So I realize Hillsborough has been sort of we're not playing, but I don't think it's for the lack of wanting to create an opportunity for all of our region to be successful and to have transit. I've been fighting for transit for 30 years. And while I too am relatively new to this board, I am wearing the Hart hat, not the Hillsborough hat, but I do wear the Hillsborough hat as the chair of Hillsborough's board. And so my goal here is to continue to have TBARTA survive. And I think it would be beneficial if TBARTA had a strategy that actually works with all of the counties, which I think we were close. We just still have a significant challenge with not only the local contribution, but the damage to the core of Hillsborough as a consequence of the needing to widen 275 significantly to make an extra lane for a BRT. There wasn't any appetite for it. So with that, I would like to make sure that we're incoming call. Sorry, go away. My car is calling me. I apologize. With that, I'd like to suggest that rather than stop or suggest that we have any hesitancy in moving forward on this at this point, is to recognize we're in a transitory place. Yes, we have had our budget cut for the next 2 years or next year. We have the revenues to be able to continue operating until we have a cohesive plan to present to Tallahassee and in partnership with FDOT. And if we were to have a regional plan, we could actually qualify for federal funds under the infrastructure bill. But right now we can't. Hillsborough can't. And so we have a shot of addressing that next year. Clearly, we don't this year. But I do not want to see the credibility of the work that's been done under TBARTA at the moment and up till this point to be wasted with the lack of commitment to it. And I'm committed to the process. So I'll stop there.
All right, and I am too, and I see Cliff's hand raised. Go ahead, Cliff.
So we likewise stay committed. And I do think there is a future for a unified transit voice. I think TBARTA can play that role. And what we wanted to have today in our policy discussion so that we could bring it up as a specific action item for discussion in our August board meeting is a consensus of opinion of what Commissioner Overman just kind of outlined. You know, do we want to exist is the first question. If we are going to exist, we definitely have to concentrate on the budget and have staff present us something that doesn't just include the expenses in our budget, but also the income and where it's coming from. I agree, we right now have to rule out Tallahassee. I just like Commissioner Long, I'm kind of tired of running up there and coming back empty-handed. But I do think we have mostly ourselves to blame for that. I've seen, as Secretary Gwynn had mentioned, regions that come together. And once they finally figure it out, where all the little loose ends in each county are tied up in a bow and presented in a unified way, they get the funding. And so whether it's TBARTA or some combination of other entities that work in Tampa Bay to create this common voice, we do got to get to the point where we have one. And we wanted this policy discussion today to focus on those issues so that we could ask staff to bring the types of things that y'all need to make a decision in August. And then I think we should sit down and talk, intelligently about our future. So that would be my recommendations.
Yeah, so I guess we'll see how everyone's budgets shake out in the next month or two. Board members, we're supposed to have a presentation on the CSX corridor. I'd love to hear it. I have time. This is my last thing for today, and then I'm going scalloping. You should see out my window. There's a million boats out there on the water because today's opening day for Pasco, and we have some people coming. So I'd love to hear the CSX corridor assessment from Brian. Any others? Can everyone hang in there? Or do we want to punt it to the next meeting?
I'd like to hear it.
Okay, Brian, can you?
Okay. Sure. Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair. So at last December's joint meeting of the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance and the TMA Leadership Group, Commissioner Starkey made the motion at TBARTA to be the lead agency on a study that did an assessment of the Brooksville and Clearwater subdivisions of the CSX. That motion passed unanimously. Just last Friday, so July 8th, TBARTA, we posted a request for qualifications, an RFQ, to seek the services of an engineering planning firm to do an assessment of those two subdivisions. That study is going to seek to answer 4 questions. 1, how much is it going to cost to upgrade the Brooksville and Clearwater subdivisions to passenger rail standards? 2, what is the recommended passenger rail project? 3, what are the upfront capital costs required to implement the project? And 4, how much would it cost to annually operate and maintain that passenger rail service? So, like I said, the RFQ is on the street right now. The proposals are due August 9th. They'll be valid for 180 days. That means they'll be valid until February 9th. The RFQ, it's being done in accordance with the Consultants Competitive Negotiation Act, or CCNA. So what that means is cost is not going to be a factor in selecting a winning proposal. Now, our internal estimate of the study cost is $500,000. The source of the funding will be our FTA Section 5307 planning funds. Now, as you're already aware, FDOT has had 2 conversations with CSX representatives. They had one in January and they had one in May. At that first conversation in January, CSX informed FDOT that they weren't interested in selling the Brooksville and Clearwater subdivisions. However, they might might be interested in leasing them. Now, at previous board meetings, FDOT has informed this board that that the state's involvement in a passenger rail project would be very limited if leasing was the only option on the table. Now, at the May meeting, the second meeting, CSX tune changed a little bit, and they told FDOT that now is not a suitable time for passenger rail discussions. They told FDOT that they are planning to increase their freight operations in Florida and in the Southeast in general, and that they're currently immersed in legal proceedings with Amtrak over new passenger rail between New Orleans and Mobile. They did offer to come speak to elected officials in the Tampa Bay area in late summer or early fall to communicate their position more clearly. So with all that information, going forward, staff, we see two options for the procurement. First option is you could terminate the RFQ. You could recommend to staff terminate the RFQ immediately based on what we have heard from CSX not being interested. The second option is allow the RFQ to continue, accept the proposals, but delay making a decision on whether to award a contract until after TBARTA hears more information directly from CSX. So that second option, that would involve TBARTA inviting CSX to speak at a future board meeting, but this would have to occur before the proposals expire on February 9th. And that's the information I have for you today. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Gonna reread that Don Quixote book in Mexico where he's chasing the windmills. We don't have a willing partner. That is not a willing partner. So what do y'all think, Commissioner Overman?
Thank you. The willing partner is dealing with a significant change to their business model, given the Amtrak situation. And when I was reviewing the state's freight plan earlier last year or late last year, early this year, there was no mention of rail. The freight plan at that point was singularly focused on the road networks that would help freight move from one place to another in the state. So I find it really interesting that CSX is now indicating that the reason it's hesitating or doesn't want to sell those lines that it previously wanted to sell, they don't want to sell it anymore now that they are being threatened that they're going to have to share their lines with TBARTA. I'm sorry, with Amtrak. That being said, postponing the RFQ or RFP or whatever it's called till after we meet with them this late fall might make better sense, because they have not only some time to work out their position with Amtrak to discern what they will have to do to make that adjustment. But it'll also give us some time to really assess where we are as a region on the concept of utilizing the existing right-of-way of the Brooksville and Clearwater lines.
Commissioner, don't mind me asking you a question. If you think you have a hard time financially supporting the BRT with the state's help in funding that, how are you guys thinking it's better to work on the CSX commuter rail with no help from the state?
I'm not suggesting that we
I'm
would go
confused.
with, yeah, no, I'm not suggesting that we would not have help from the state. I am suggesting that timing matters. Right now, given our current financial situation without a surtax to pay for any kind of transit whatsoever, yes. That's why I'm suggesting having these conversations when Hillsborough is in a better position to actually play and plan. because it's critically important the Hillsborough actually do that, because our roads are not able to handle the incoming from our surrounding counties in terms of a road network. And transit, given the level of growth that we've seen, and not only in our entire region, that I don't see slowing down anytime soon, recognizing the lack of having a passenger rail available to us in maybe 10 years or more is, is short-sighted in my opinion, because I think we have to have some. And it gives us the opportunity to address the existing right-of-way. My original request before the item was voted on was to really to assess the right-of-way, to protect the right-of-way, because the right-of-way of those lines are crucial to exploring opportunities for passenger rail in our area, because it's the right-of-way issue the Hillsborough's dealing with from the citizens that are going to be impacted by the most by any rail project, because of the right-of-way that's needed. And with the cost of land right now, that's really cost prohibitive. So looking at what's possible along those right-of-ways where CSX lines are was my original goal to bring it up in the first place, is what are we negotiating? What would we be negotiating? Not to plan out the whole agency, but what would we be negotiating with CSX given that they own the right of way? And what is the condition of the land? So that we would know what cards we have in our hands, instead of CSX always having all the cards and knowing what deck we're playing with. We don't have that information. We don't have an understanding of what the level of the right of way is, what the level and the condition of the track is, what's even possible to be put in those places as it pertains to any type of passenger rail choice. And so this was an effort to really assess what is the deck of cards we're playing with here, in order to be able to negotiate with the landowner, of that CSX owns in the way of the right of way. So I would recommend, not that we can move on anything today, because we don't have a quorum and we're not in person. Or we may have a quorum, but we're not in person, so we can't make any recommendations in terms of a vote. But I would recommend that we do delay the RFQ, that we work with the Suncoast Planning Alliance and or the TMA and or TBARTA board to reach a meeting with the state, with FDOT, with CSX, and with Amtrak, to really see what's possible and why it's important to our region. And I believe if we were able to go through that process and hear from all of the stakeholders, we may be in a better position for allowing TBARTA to continue to exist.
So, Commissioner Overman, and the board members, we have CSX has offered to come down. I'm trying to look for my notes here. CSX has offered to come down and talk to us. Shall we extend that invitation and have them, and we can all ask them our questions and see what that shakes out like? Are you interested?
I would support that.
And not anyone else?
Yes, Commissioner Holcomb. I always like to get more information, so I'd like to hear him talk.
Okay, so let's did we have to take action on that, on Brian, to hold off on that study? Maybe we want to hold off on that study and have CSX come talk to us. And would that be at our next board meeting, or when? Do you know when they would be available?
We would have to reach out to them, but I just want to be clear when we say hold off on the study, what's this? I want to be clear.
Asking us
if we I want to be clear on what you mean by that. I mean, because I had mentioned that the proposals they will be valid for 180 days. Is is the recommendation to staff that we continue to allow the RFQ process to go forward, take the proposals, but just hold off on making a decision on awarding a contract.
Board members, and I don't, can we take action like that today?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No, we can't. And honestly, I think it would be important to have a good understanding of what the playing field looks like before we try to design a study that may or may not be able to address the issues that we learn in the fall. Now, granted, we still have until what, February to issue it. But if we're not asking for the right information, if the study isn't asking for the right details for us to move forward in the event that we hear an opportunity to negotiate with CSX and Amtrak or anybody else in the state, you know, it would be, we would have to go back and modify the RFQ.
Yeah. And let me
So-
just give you a little bit more information on what's in the RFQ. So it does include a scope of work for consultant teams to respond to. That scope of work that we've has 3 tasks. Task 1 is the corridor assessment. That's the primary purpose of the study. You know, it's assessing the physical condition of the tracks, identification of all the necessary upgrades that would be needed to accommodate passenger rail, and what are the costs. That's task 1. Task 2 is the concept of operations, where the consultant will develop a passenger rail concept of operations that includes identifying appropriate transit technologies, a recommended number of stations along with their general locations, a recommended span and frequency of service. And then task 3 is case studies. We want the consultant to look at case studies of negotiations from other parts of the country between state and local governments and private freight rail operators. The purpose of this task is to just give us a better understanding of the issues that would likely come up in any future negotiations with CSX. So that's what's in the scope of work. That is what, if we allow the RFQ to go forward, you will have planning engineering firms that are going to be putting together proposals on how to respond to that.
I like that. I like that. I do think it's important that we, you know, we meet with CSX, and if we meet with CSX in November, that only gives us 2 months to act on whatever the proposals come back. Is that correct? Or 3 months?
We would have to award a contract. The February board meeting would probably be too late because the proposals will expire February 9th. So if we were going to award a contract, we would have to do it probably by the January board meeting.
And I don't see us having enough information after an initial meeting with the CSX at, you know, maybe November or December, that this board would be best prepared for issuing that contract in January.
Yeah, so I guess it comes down to, is the 180 days that the proposals are going to be valid for, does that give you enough time? I think that's what it comes down to.
I need Cliff Manuel.
So obviously we can't take action today, but at the board meeting in August, we should provide clear direction, and a policy committee can provide by consensus our thoughts. The question I had, Commissioner Overman, when we were talking about this before, relates to the study itself and what it provides us as far as tools in our chest, so to speak, to use when we sit down with CSX, so we actually know the kinds of things that rail corridor could provide as benefits to, you know, that Brooksville connection. There's a lot of information in the scope of work that he just mentioned that would be useful to have, whether CSX were on board or not. And it seems like ultimately when you sit down with CSX and start talking about leases or purchase or the state's involvement, a lot of what he just outlined would be beneficial to have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you do get there, I can tell you for the 30 years that I've been working in the industry, every time we've waited on CSX to take the lead, it just hasn't happened. So I think if that corridor is ever going to be studied, someone's going to have to take the first step, and Secretary Gwynn knows a lot better than I do how that might work with, you know, CSX, but they certainly haven't provided any leadership for that type of passenger rail consideration. in the Tampa Bay area. So
Something that I need to,
I would probably support, try to support it myself. I'd like the information that's in that scope of work. Of course, we need the time to make a decision, see a full presentation, and have the entire board weigh in on it. But and maybe we should revise this, get the scope kind of aligned to exactly what would be beneficial to the board to sit down and discuss these options with CSX on. But I like a lot of what's in that scope of work that you've put together, Brian, and I think there's a lot of very meaningful things in there that would be beneficial to have when we had intelligent discussions with CSX about whether they would ever participate in that.
Something that's important that I do need to point out to the committee members, that doing the physical assessment of the corridor, it will require the cooperation of CSX. I mean, it's their property. And, if one of the tasks is assessing the physical condition of the tracks, we just can't have our consultants wandering onto CSX property without CSX's cooperation.
And is it your feeling, Brian, that they, or Secretary Gwynn, that they wouldn't even provide that level of cooperation for a study?
I can't comment on that since I was not present for either of those meetings.
He asked Secretary Gwynn if he thought they would, I think.
Yeah, and I have Ming here in the background with me, but they were willing to talk to you in general terms, and anybody can call them and they'll talk to you, but they won't really talk to you in detail until they think there's a project or there's something real. It's just, if they think it's just information gathering, you won't get the details that you need at the end of the game to figure out what needs to happen. So will they let you on the right of way? I don't know. I guess we could talk to them about that, but they don't like spending a lot of time talking about things that really are just pie in the sky things, in their opinion. And they're going to require the state to be involved. I mean, they know that any project that would have it would have to go through the legislature to get approved anyway. I mean, there's a lot of hurdles that would have to pass, and they don't want to waste their time just talking and not really having something, that's got meat to it, I believe.
And
Ming had one thing. Go ahead, Ming.
yeah, and I just want to add that Brian is absolutely correct. So in order for a consultant to walk along the CSX tracks, they do need to get CSX permission. Otherwise, they have their own police force. When they see people walking along the track, they will come intervene and kick you off the track. And another thing I want to point out is, if anyone had the chance to watch the public hearing on the Gulf Coast line services, between Amtrak and CSX, that was, pretty contentious, and now they're in mediation. So even Amtrak, a big company, they brought in their expert, they did the assessment on the CSX track. They didn't know all the details involving all the yards operation or the switching operation. So all this information brought out by CSX, you have to bring CSX in order to do a true assessment on the impacts, because those are not public information. No consulting can just Google it or just walk into a yard and say, well, we want to do assessment. That's not how it works. Recognize the Clearwater subdivision heading toward downtown is running right on the edge of two switching yards. And the impact of those yards, no one can figure that out other than CSX. They can tell you, how many trains they're going to switch in those yards and how often they will use that subdivision for staging. So all that information you need to get from CSX. So, Brian and I had conversations, I basically told him, you can certainly move forward with the study, but you're not going to have a true assessment until you have a willing partner here. So, that's a reason why we reach out to CSX to see if they're interested and they're willing to be a partner, not to negotiate, just truly try to figure it out, their interest level and their willingness to participate. That's all we try to do. And I told Brian that, if necessary, TBARTA can certainly reach out to CSX directly I mean, we've been trying to help, but, you want to talk to CSX directly, they're certainly welcome to do that.
Cliff, do you want to finish your comments and then we'll go to Commissioner Overman, then we probably need to be wrapping this up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dave, Secretary Gwynn, you've mentioned several times when we've visited about these types of things that in order for them to sit down with us intelligently, we have to have a project. Without the study or any idea about what we're trying to accomplish, how do we ever sit down with a project? I don't understand how that works. It seems like we have to have the base information in this RFQ even to decide if we want a project. So how do we get from where we are today, which is nowhere, to the point where we can sit down with a project to discuss it with CSX to see if they would ever be a willing partner?
You want to go, Ming?
So, first of all, when you talk to CSX, you do need to present to them what you're looking at, what scenario, because, they want to know how much impact, our proposal would have on their overall operation. Again, it's not just the line, but also the yard, the switching operation, they have to accommodate. So, without any specific is very hard for CSX to give you comment or give you a proposal. And, second thing I want to point out is to fund a project of this magnitude, you need federal fund, you need state fund, you need local participation. So, without having any specific, it's hard to have that conversation, even at the state level, not to mention the federal level. We had done assessment on this line a couple of times, first in 2008, before 2008, we had the Tampa Rail study. The most recent one was 2008. We did the assessment and that was not suitable. That's how we came up with the Tampa Light Rail concept that runs more close to 275 corridor. And without, supporting riderships, it's tough to go to Federal Transit Administration asking for funding. And the same thing for the state, because we pretty much follow the FTA standard. So we really need to think about, what kind of project we want to have and how we're going to finance it and how we can justify it, without, all that justification, we're just having conversation, having talks. And CSX certainly would not be coming to the table if they don't believe we have a legitimate project that could be funded by federal and state.
Okay, Cliff, is your hand still up, or because
I just wanted to, and then I'm definitely going to move over to Commissioner Overman. Ming, that with this study, in your opinion, that we're looking at funding, provide any benefit to the state to help define a project that, it's just interesting to me when we say we need to define a project, and if this board's going to participate at any level, we have a study that we can provide y'all. It has a scope of work in it that I'm sure you've reviewed with Brian. Does that in any way provide any benefit to us defining a project that might at least open their eyes to the possibility of detailed analysis and study?
Well, quite frankly, that information we already have. TBARTA had a assessment, basically assessment of any viable regional corridor, right? So we came up with two options, early on. If you recall, we had the CSX corridor and we had the BRT, the regional BRT project. And at the time, I think we looked at the cost. If you remember, from the cost benefit analysis, we basically say, well, the BRT is a project that we're going to move forward with, and CSX project is for a very long term project. We will look at it, but it's just not feasible at this point. So now we are at it again, having similar conversation. So we have to ask ourselves, is there something we want to pursue? from a regional perspective, I mean, if that is the project everyone want to focus on, then okay, then we have to take a look at it again and provide more detail what we're looking at, what we're looking for. And at the same time, since it involves a private company, you know, something that we don't have any control over really, we need to start reaching out to CSX. And that's why, you know, we reach out to CSX and ask them, okay, so we got your 2015 presentation. Are we going to follow the same parameters? And the feedback we got was no, their strategy had changed. They're not interested in selling, but they're willing to talk about leasing. So that changed the whole different scenario. And that's why, you know, when I talked to Brian, you know, at this point, should we focus on assessing the condition of the line, or should we try to talk to CSX first and see what they're willing to accommodate? Then we can come up with a project. Even think about, is it legit? I mean, is it a feasible project? Because if CSX wanted to take up majority of the time for freight operation, then we don't have a big window for passenger service. I mean, is there something we still want to do? Because you don't want to spend $1 billion, you know, making improvements that we don't even own the track and buying all, you know, all the equipments, and the train cars and all that, only to operate in a small window. I mean, what does that do? I mean, to improve our mobility. And I mean, all that, we really need to get a better handle on CSX approach before we have that conversation. And that's what we've been trying to, you know, talk about and figure out what to do.
Yeah. So we could meet with them, set some basic parameters, and then figure out how to guide our study to try to make it move towards Cliff, what you're saying, which is something because when we get all the counties together and they do an interlocal agreement, or they do something to show that there is support for this, then, you know, CSX may start being more serious with us.
I agree, and thank you for the feedback. I appreciate it.
All right, Commissioner Overman.
And I'll wrap this up. I honestly, I think this is a matter of timing. So if, you know, if the RFQ gives CSX a clear indication that we're serious about moving forward and will ultimately at some point have a project, we have a project now. It's to figure out what's possible. But the timing is the only thing I hear, because it does appear as though we would like to really investigate an opportunity to take advantage of that right away. So if we're not going to have a productive conversation with the entire TBARTA board or the region until the fall, but having this study move forward with a decision to accept the report in January, because that's when we would actually have to move forward on it. Then, you know, if we have enough time from after we meet with CSX to do that, then that's fine. I would like to see us move forward. I would like to see the study done. And I would like to have an opportunity to hear how CSX might either modify it and or negotiate it. And I'll stop there.
All right. So I think we have consensus to move forward with the study, to invite CSX to come speak to us. David, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. I was just gonna, I guess, confirm that understanding. You know, I think it's absolutely a good idea to get more information from CSX, and it sounds like everybody's in agreement that that's the best course of action. But what we're talking about right now is not spending any money or doing the study. We're talking about just the RFQ. We're talking about receiving responses and evaluating consultants to determine who might be the best firm in order to do work like we're talking about. So I don't see any harm in doing the procurement and receiving the proposals and doing that evaluation, but we're not awarding a contract until well after we talk to CSX and get that information that everybody's looking for.
Right, and if we needed to tweak it, then we could, the scope.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I had two questions for really Secretary Gwynn, based on comment that Commissioner Overman made, and maybe I can only remember one of them now. She mentioned having the need to widen 275. And I think the contentious area for Hillsborough is in the Seminole Heights area. Did you need to widen the 275 corridor to have BRT be successful in that area? Or did you already have the right of way?
Well, we have the right of way. We don't necessarily need to widen 275, but in order to use highway funds to build those improvements, we'd have to widen the highway because we couldn't just build transit with highway funds. We could do the transit improvements incidental to the highway with no cost to the transit project, right?
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct. So in order to accommodate BRT, all we need is to widen our highway shoulder by 2 to 5 feet, because we prefer to have a 15-foot shoulder. Right now, typically we have 10-foot shoulder, but you can run on a 12-foot shoulder as well if necessary. But we don't just go in there and widen the shoulder. We don't build a project just to widen the shoulder. What the secretary was talking about is that as part of the highway improvement project, we can use highway funds to improve the shoulder in order to provide the infrastructure for transit. And that's what we're talking about. If it's a strictly transit shoulder project, then the transit project will have to carry the cost of widening the shoulder. So, without the 275 improvement project north of downtown, then we're not going to be able to do the shoulder improvement unless there's a dedicated transit project from the operating agency. And I don't even know who that will be at this time.
And widening the shoulders may sound simple, but you start getting into having to widen bridges and other things. So it's not as cheap as you might think.
Yeah, and the fill material and the walls.
So.
Okay. I can't remember what my other question was this. The on the CSX and the state's participation financially, is that a policy decision, or is that etched in stone and never to be changed? Just curious.
As far as our participation in
putting money into a line that you don't own.
Well, there are specific rules that relate to commuter rail.
Right. Isn't the requirement that in order for TBARTA to work on a rail project, they need to get legislature approval?
I believe that's true.
David, Brian, I don't remember exactly the legislative language. I believe that is part of the original language.
TBARTA can do a feasibility study, and we would have to provide the study to the legislature and to all of the MPOs and counties. And there would need to be agreement amongst all of those, the counties and MPOs, but we absolutely can do a feasibility study.
Okay. Well, those are the two questions I had. I guess we will close the policy committee. We do have our lobbyists on here. Is there anything pressing that you would want to say to us, either Harry or Ron? It's been a long meeting, but a good meeting.
No, ma'am, I'm good on my end.
Okay, Harry?
No, I think, Tricia, the only thing I'd mention is, I know not for TBARTA necessarily, but for some of the people on the call, I know there's been interest in the Tampa Bay area on the ferry program, and FTA announced on July 9th, they released their notice of funding opportunity for the 3 ferry boat grant programs. There's money for the regular ferry boat program, which is, $39 million, $36.5 million for that. There's a new program created in the bipartisan infrastructure bill for electric or low emitting ferry pilot program. There's $49 million available for that. And there's a rural ferry program, which doesn't really impact you, for $209 million. There was a drafting error in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. There was supposed to be a boost to both the regular ferry program and the rural ferry program. That's why the rural ferry program's at $209 million and the regular ferry program's only at $36.5 million. There was a drafting area error. They're trying to fix that, so there'd be parity between rural and non-rural ferry, but that hasn't been fixed yet. So the responses are due to FTA by September the 6th. So it's a pretty short turnaround. That pretty much completes the cycle of infrastructure grants notices for this year on the transportation transit side. There are 2 more grants that'll be noticed, but they don't really impact you. They're for rail projects, and it's to make rail platforms more ADA accessible and to replace rail cars. That doesn't do anything to help you all. That's the only thing that Congress is working through their appropriations process, trying to get done by the end of the year and continue to be robust numbers for transportation and transit. There was a hearing this week in the Senate with Nuria Fernandez, the FTA administrator. She talked significantly about workplace safety for transit workers and also rider safety for passengers. That was her big, and also connecting transit to housing continues to be a priority of this administration. Secretary Buttigieg is going to be before the Congress testifying before the House next week to give an update on some of the grant programs. So that's pretty much, Madam Chair, the update from Washington.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody have anything else? Otherwise, we will say goodbye.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.